Thank you, Mr. President. Luis Tobar, Telecinco News. I had a question related to what you said this morning. Could you tell us how much money Spain is going to invest in this NATO initiative to invest in US arms to then give it to Ukraine? And then, also related to this and the defense spending, yesterday, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said in public that he believes, and you or Spain have said it, that it is not possible to meet the objective of 5% in defense with 2.1%. And he was not talking about capacities. Do you think that what you say, that with 2.1% it can already be met with 5%, he thinks it is not possible? And one last question. In Clave National, Junts will meet its executive on Monday in Perpignan to decide what is the future of its relationship with the Socialist Party. There is information that even points to a militancy consultation to decide whether or not to break relations. My question is very direct. Given that point, do you think it would be useful to have a meeting in person between you and Mr. Piedmont here in Belgium? Thank you.
Very well, Luis. Thank you for your questions. In relation to the Pearl, today we just learned that 2 Spanish fighters in Lithuania had to repel an incursion in the airspace of NATO, in this case in Lithuania, by Russian fighters. I think that this is not the first time, and in fact I think that some of you accompanied me when we had the opportunity to do a press conference at the Lithuanian military base, where we have deployed some of our fighters, and also of the Spanish armed forces. I think that if that proves something, apart from the fact that it is not the first time that it happens, it is that Spain is committed. It is committed to the security of the eastern flank of the European Union, and therefore of the Atlantic Alliance, and that we are a reliable country and a country that logically fulfills its obligations. And in that sense, when it was proposed by NATO to the United States administration to create this joint purchase, Spain did what it did. First, it was the Minister of Defense. Then, in a conversation I had with President Zelensky a few days ago by phone, we said that we were going to buy US weapons to transfer it to the security and defense of Ukraine. Why do we do it? Well, basically because today the bulk of the components of air defense, the so-called Patriots, or the famous Tomahawks, which you already know and which obviously need Ukraine, are only manufactured in the United States. Anyway, hopefully in the near future, when we talk about strategic autonomy, and in fact the SAFE instrument and some of the emblematic projects that we are going to finance with community money to reindustrialize Europe, and therefore to strengthen the European defense industry, can be manufactured in Europe. In any case, as you know, to reach that 2%, we launched what we have called the Industrial and Technological Plan of the Spanish Security and Defense, where more than 10 billion euros of increase we are going to allocate in more than 90% to investments in European soil, and that 90%, 8 of every 10 euros, will go to the Spanish defense industry, with which we are building that strategic autonomy that Europe needs, for which Spain has worked and works, to create not only ecosystems, but also employment and also security and strategic autonomy in European soil. Therefore, this is the first of the questions. The second of the questions in relation to the Secretary General of NATO, I have always said it, you know it, the 2.1% of GDP is not a figure that the government has invented, nor of course its president, but that the armed forces, once they agreed with NATO the capacities that we have to put in motion, that we have to guarantee from here to 2035, we get 2.1% of GDP. Therefore, that is the agreement, and of course we are going to fulfill it. In fact, I think that if I have done something as president of the government, it has been not only to fulfill my commitments, but with those of before, Because before there was another president who in 2014 signed that Spain was going to spend 2% of GDP in defense. And when I came to government, I realized that we were not spending 2%, we were spending 0.9%. Therefore, I had to go from 0.9% to 2.1% of GDP. Anyway, if someone has fulfilled, it is me. Therefore, the opposition in this should look more in the mirror and be more humble in their criticisms. And in relation to the last question, I said it this morning. I respect, of course, the internal functioning of any political party. It would be necessary more. What is in the hands of the government of Spain, we are fulfilling. What is in the hands of others, we are working for it to be fulfilled. I have already spoken clearly. We are fulfilling what is in our hands. And what is not in our hands, we are working for it to be fulfilled.